in Geneva, Switzerland. By way of an opening gambit, a European CCHR task force feeds campaign booklets and materials to the UN Committee on Children's Rights. Said materials are tantamount to spinach for Popeye, and a previously mild-mannered committee is transformed into a psych-busting dynamo, whereupon they set out to discover why Norwegian kids are the fourth most drugged adolescent population on Earth. All concerned parties are duly summoned to the UN Office of the High Commissioner on Human Rights for what amounts to a formal interrogation within UN chambers. Among others under scrutiny are both Norway's Minister of Health and the Norwegian Minister of Children. But upon closer scrutiny, it seems there's someone else seated at the table to help direct the questioning. Namely, and most significantly, a party of CCHR psych-busting Vikings led by IAS Freedom Medal winner Paul Ruud. Then how the sparks fly as UN Rapporteur on Children's Rights grills the Norwegian contingent for drugging kids simply because they didn't do their homework. To which Norway cries, "It's not our fault, we were hoodwinked by psychiatrists." Next, there's a repeat performance inspired by CCHR investigations across the rest of Scandinavia, beginning with Denmark. In a word, and it's razor sharp, when the Danish delegation concedes ADHD drugging is perhaps a little excessive, the UN replies, "Denmark is drugging children to keep them manageable, period." There was still a final decisive moment in Scandinavian history when a Finnish delegation is hammered for allowing a 100-fold increase in psychostimulant prescriptions to kids, and then told point blank, "You need a surveillance system to monitor what's going on." At which point this story too goes positively epic, because the United Nations, as an international body with unqualified power, has just declared unrestrained drugging of children to be a human rights violation, and that's safeguarding entire populations on this 27th IAS anniversary. For all the cataclysmic upheaval unleashed upon psychiatry of late, there's still one more tale of catastrophe to tell. It follows from what climaxed last year regarding British pharma giant GlaxoSmithKline. In particular, how the psychotropic monster finds itself in the crosshairs of a product liability suit owing to devastating side effects from an antidepressant known as Paxil. Whereupon Glaxo is forced to settle all pending cases, ultimately totaling better than $1 billion in fines and damages. At which point Glaxo throws in the lab coat and unloads its entire antidepressant arm forever and for good. Next, and if only to cap it, barely 1 month later, American psych drug leviathan AstraZeneca likewise dumps its psych drug division owing to suits arising from its killer drug, Seroquel. Well, as it stands tonight, another chapter is unfolding, this one entitled The Decline and Fall of Johnson & Johnson and concerning an antipsychotic known as Risperdal. J&J illegally prescribed it to children and elderly, for which they've now been whacked in nearly a dozen states, amounting to $1 billion in judgments and fines. Although, that's still the least of it. Because given Paxil, Seroquel, and Risperdal are by no means isolated cases, and in fact the whole psych drug lineup is nothing more than someone's wild guess that some chemical compound might impact some part of the brain, well, it's no wonder that they're all dangerous, as evidenced by an ongoing and never-ending parade of federal regulatory warnings. And those warnings are now coming from every major psych market, from here in the United Kingdom, Australia and New Zealand, Canada, and of course from the USA. In fact, it's 28 international warnings in the last year alone. So yes, having made such a god-awful mess of their industry that they can't get the toothpaste back in the tube, pharmaceuticals have finally reached a tipping point. Or as the psychs themselves describe it, it's a full-blown pharma crisis with headlines such as these. The UK's Guardian, research into brain disorders under threat as drug firms pull out. The New York Times, side effects may include lawsuits. Psychology Today, drug companies just saying no to psych drugs. And MedPage Today, APA, psych drug well running dry. All of which returns us to the big American Psych Convention in Hawaii. Because in contemplating what the hell might be done about it, Psychiatry's leading lights stage a special closed-door workshop. It's entitled The War, Understanding and Confronting Scientology's Efforts to Destroy Psychiatry. And should you wonder what was actually discussed, well, the fact is, you're living it right now. Meaning, they began that conference by airing a pirated copy of this event from an earlier IAS anniversary. After which, the room falls silent with slack-jawed horror, while the psych workshop leader could only mutter, "Not just fun and games." And of course, he's right, to a degree.